Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the second session here at this venue. This session is Personalizing Place Histories. We have two speakers, Rakhshanda Jalil and Srikar Raghavan. The moderator is Aparna Rayaprol. Rakhshanda Jalil is a multi-award-winning translator, writer, and literary historian. She has published over 25 books and written over 50 academic papers and essays. Her books include Love in the Time of Hate, In the Mirror of Urdu 2024, Liking Progress, Loving Change, a literary history of the progressive writers movement in Urdu 2014, a biography of Urdu feminist writer Dr. Rashid Jahan, A Rebel and Her Cause 2014, and a translation of Intizar Hussein's The Sea Lies Ahead 2015. Srikar Raghavan is an independent writer and researcher. His first degree was in engineering before he decided to switch to the humanities, where he has remained. He is a recipient of a New India Foundation Fellowship. His debut book, Ramabhima Som, Cultural Investigations into Modern Karnataka 2025, won the award for Best Non-Fiction at the Atta Galata Prize in 2025. Aparna Rayaprol is at the Department of Sociology, University of Hyderabad, and served as the head of the department. A leading scholar in gender studies, urban sociology, and migration and diaspora, she has published Negotiating Identities, Women in the Indian Diaspora 1997, along with numerous other impactful publications. She holds a PhD from the University of Pittsburgh and pursued postdoctoral research at Princeton University's Center for the Study of American Religion. Since the inception of the Study in India program in 1998, she has been at the heart of shaping global classrooms and intercultural learning at the University of Hyderabad. Ma'am, over to you.
Am I audible? Yeah? Okay, thank you. A very good afternoon to all of you. And it is indeed my pleasure to be moderating this panel that has been titled Personalizing Place. So it's very interesting that we have two at first different vibes when we see the titles of the book. Rakhshanda Jalil's book is Basti and Darbar and talks about a city, or can I say a region now, that has been historically fictionalized. So it's a collection of short stories. And we do have extremely different authors, for instance, Khushwant Singh and Manjula Padmanabhan, talking about, their perspectives. And sometimes, if you read Padmanabhan's story, it can be anywhere, but it is in Delhi. That's the point. And then we have Srikar Raghavan's book, which is titled Rama, Bhima, Soma. And I'm not going to tell you what that is. I leave that part of the puzzle for those of you who don't know to be unraveled by Srikar a little later. But here, once I said it's different because this is non-fiction, and this is really something that is personal. This is Srikar's slice of Karnataka that we get to see. Politics, sports, literature, stories, lives, what have you. And there is his learning about socialism and Marxism and culture. What exactly constitutes culture? So I think place and culture is really central to both the books. And for someone who is interested in cities and places and spaces and regions like me, I think it got me thinking about how we all begin to reflect about place in particular. So I will ask Rakhshanda to tell us about the title of the collection of short stories. And then Srikar will talk about his as well. Over to you.
Thank you, Aparna. Now, Delhi is now being called the National Capital Region, and it has, like an amoeba, changed its shape and assimilated into itself a whole bunch of other places that were Gurgaon and, the other townships that were all around it. I must confess that the actual title of the book was given by my very intelligent, very amazing publisher, Ravi Singh of Speaking Tiger. Basti and Darbar, Delhi to New Delhi. In a moment of epiphany, I think, he said to me, why don't we call it this? And indeed, it fits the volume to a T. This is a collection of short stories and some extracts from novels. So essentially, it is fiction. We were curious when we set out, and I'm the editor of this book. This is not my writing. It's a bunch of writing by a bunch of different people. It does include one of my short stories, but a motley group of people have contributed to this volume. And we wanted to see how does Delhi appear in fiction, in stories. We say it very casually that Delhi is a storied city. Now, what does it mean? I mean, all those hundreds of years of history, there is the professional historian giving you their version. But what does the creative writer make of that history that has come to us like a river in spate, And how does that history appear? And I think there's something about Delhi that every 10 years, there is a Delhi anthology. You might be familiar with the ones edited by Khushwant Singh. But there was no Ravish Kumar writing about Ishq Mein Dilli back in the day. So there is, like I say, it's a river in spate. There's always something new that's just flowing down your bank. And so I think this city, this area, this region requires it. And by calling it Basti and Darbar, I think Ravi was putting his finger to the real point that this is a city that is changing itself. It was the Darbar in 1911, as you might know, of the whole colonial enterprise. But what is Basti? Basti is just a dwelling, a habitation. And in one way or the other, that's what Delhi has been for hundreds of years.
Am I audible? Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. So I think there's at least two commonalities with what you said. One is that it was my publisher who helped me finalize this name for the title of the book. So Rama Bhima Soma is this childhood ball game we used to play in school, which I suspect almost everyone here would have encountered in some form or the other. All you need is a ball, and you throw this ball high up in the air, and then you wait for it to pitch 3 times, which you count off as Rama, Bhima, Soma, and then you just take the ball and you're just hitting everyone with it. A very barbarian sort of game. But there's a metaphor of democracy that I found in this game, which is that the ball is never monopolized by anyone. It's always changing hands. Everyone is briefly king until the ball is passed to the next person. And if you get close to someone, if you touch them, then they can't hit you. And so you have this endless web of interconnections where you're always alternating between the self and the other. So that was the title of the introduction to the manuscript I'd sent to the publisher, and she just loved it. She said that should be the name of the book. And I said, yeah, absolutely. It's a perfect title. And also, it captured the tumultuous debates and dialogues and fights that were happening in Kannada literary society in the last few decades of the 20th century, which is really the primary subject of this book. What was happening in Karnataka between 1970s, 1980s, 1990s. Though I do move back in history a fair bit, but what was special about this particular time was there was this extraordinary upsurge of social movements, whether it is the Dalit movement, farmers' movements, street theater, feminist movements, just a young generation of students, really, who are fed up with the world as it is and want to do something about it. And this spills over into literature, and writers like U.R. Anantamurthy, who some of you might know, or Devnur Mahadeva, D.R. Nagaraj. So these were all part of this generation who really reflected on what was happening around them in their writings. So on many levels, this game as a metaphor was appropriate to the subject of the book. And again, the dynamism that you spoke of, that's again part of this, where you have each generation of writers rebelling and quarreling with the earlier ones, at once being a friend and an enemy. And so there was this space of critical reflection and thought and political vociferousness, being unafraid of voicing what you feel, even if it was somewhat naive, or just being able to say that and to reflect on it and say, okay, maybe I was wrong. So that culture of dynamism, of openness, of a kind of radical honesty. So all of these came into this title of the book.
Fascinating. I think if I can push you a little more there, because, I really like to tell students how to do research, and I think this was a phenomenal piece of research, your sources. How did you, come to pick your sources? And I also want you to tell us about your own personal linguistic history, the Tamil and the Kannada and the English that you talk about. But I want you to tell us how you picked your sources and what became the backbone of this writing.
So I knew from the beginning that it was going to be a kind of literary history because I'm a student of literature. I did my MA in English, but so where I studied in Manipal, there was such a encouragement for vernacular writings. And they said enough of, Eliot or Shakespeare or Chaucer, a million books out there. Why don't you read in your mother tongues and help us understand, this khichdi that we call India. And so I was born in Bangalore, but I was actually in Hyderabad until fourth standard because my dad was working here and picked up a little bit of Telugu. But when I was in fourth standard, we moved back to Mysore, and so we spoke Kannada and Tamil at home, but Kannada was the sort of lingua franca. That's what I spoke at school. It's what friendship was about. It's what humor was about. But because I studied in a CBSE school, I was in a Kendriya Vidyalaya, I had more of Hindi than I did of Kannada. So though I learned the script, I could read newspapers maybe, but I'd never actually read Kannada books, Kannada literature. So I had a very oral relationship with the language. So it was only when I came to my master's course and this new encouragement of reading in your mother tongues that I picked up Kannada. And so I started reading very painstakingly. It took a while to get a grasp of, the vocabulary, and just to be able to read comfortably and fast, that took a few months. But once that initial hurdle was passed, it was just this wealth of literary material waiting. There's so much to read about, and not just literature, even history. Unless you read the language, you're not privy to the little niches and all the books that have been written about it. So the project started out as a sort of literary cultural history of Karnataka. That's what my pitch to the New India Foundation was. And then I just started hoarding books, and I started interviewing writers, activists, people who lived through these times, and they'd give me their own suggestions. You should read this book. And if I go to someone's home, they'll give me a copy. So I'll try to follow up on that, read that, and that leads you to another book. So it was, again, kind of Rama Bhima Soma, just moving from one thing to another. And so that was how the research went on.
No, I think that wanting to read so much and giving a sense of everyone's, take on what you see, I think reflects so well there. I'd like to take the same thought to you and ask you about, one, because the languages is what we talked about, the translations, how you were just telling me outside about, how you commission the translations sometimes. if you could tell us that a little bit, but after that also, how did you really select these stories to be your Delhi that you want to present to us? Because I'm sure there'll be many Delhis, and there are some people here in the audience who've made that NCR region their home as well, right?
Yeah.
So would they agree with these versions? They don't need to, but
Yeah.
what is yours?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So actually this session is proving to be quite a revelation, and it seems seemingly disparate books have more in common than one would have thought initially. Certainly, I'm also approaching this book from the point of view of a literary historian, which is my own training. And I've always been interested in how history and literature intersect. And you know, that common space between these two big streams. No, I just need my hands. Sorry. So those two streams, you know, and that space where literature and history intersect, that has been of great all-consuming interest to me for the past 20 odd years. And that, oddly enough, came through in this book as well. Because, and to also come to your question about how I commission these, you know, one has a magpie brain. There are bits and pieces that you retain of your varied, eclectic reading. Not because you say, okay, one fine day I'm going to edit an anthology on Delhi and I'm going to need it. No, that's not how it works. People with a magpie brain just retain random bits of information. So I may not remember that it was Kamleshwar's story or whatever, and what was the title of that story, but I will have a vague idea that many years ago I'd read something by Kamleshwar, and it had some reference to Delhi, you know? So in a tangential way, you carry it in your mind. And I think that's why it helps to read. And it helps to read as randomly as possible without an agenda. I'm a great believer in reading without an agenda because, you know, you can pluck it from somewhere and use it. So there was that. And then, you know, the Beatles song, I Get By with a Little Help from My Friends. So you talk to people, you have these conversations. Now with Facebook, you just put out a post, hey guys, what have you read on whatever, you know. So crowd sourcing. So there are ways and means of how you edit and put together an anthology. Like all anthologies, this is subjective. There is no way of saying this is definitive. I don't think by its very nature any anthology can really be. One tries to tick the boxes. One tries to get the, you know, this voice and that voice and so on and so forth. I was talking to somebody after the book had come out, and I said to myself, oh my God, I forgot to get an expat voice, right? So there is always something you will miss in an anthology. And it'll occur to you after the fact, as it were. So one has tried to get the migrants and the people who talk about, you know, people at the bottom of the socio-economic pyramid. And then there are the usual suspects. You can't have a Delhi volume without a Khushwant Singh and so on. And then, I'm sorry, with great respect for Khushwant Saab, then there are the four, in Delhi's case, the NCR has 4 official languages. There is English, Hindi, Urdu, and Punjabi. So we have writings in all 4 languages. In some instances, I don't read Punjabi, but living in Delhi, I follow it. The other, Hindi and Urdu, of course, I read. So at the back of my mind, there were instances of things that I'd read, you know, and translation didn't exist, so we commissioned some. In some instances, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We knew that a translation of such and such book existed. This is not just short stories. We've also plucked and culled extracts, self-contained extracts from novels that read in a fairly sensible, coherent way as self-contained little, you know, passages that make sense, that don't really need a before and after. So we've got those as well. But I think the fun really lay in getting disparate voices. And your comment is very well made, that there'll be people in this room who will remember Delhi with fondness, with anger, with disgust, with indifference, or what's the fuss all about, or whatever. So Delhi reveals itself to people differently. And I don't think, because it's big, I mean, nothing special about it, it's just too large. So there will always be the Lutyens Delhi and the Lodi Gardens and the Khan Market, and then there'll be Trans Jamna, and there'll be Seelampur, and there'll be all kinds of things. There'll be the little ghettos, the enclaves, the colony, as we still say. Horrible word though it is.
Yeah, we can come back later.
Yeah? So, okay. So,
I wanted you to pick
may I?
one of those favorite passages
No,
that you
I
might
don't know
want.
about favorite passage, but would you permit me to read a couple
Absolutely,
of paragraphs from my
absolutely. Yeah,
introduction?
yeah.
I think the opening, let me read 2 or 3 paras from the opening, and that, as it were, lays out the contours of this book. How, if at all, does a city like Delhi find representation in fiction? How does the creative writer see the city? As a prop to locate a story? As a feeling or a lived experience? As a blank canvas to imagine or reimagine? To paint or repaint the city of his or her dreams? Is the city central or peripheral to the writer's concerns? Can the spirit of Delhi, the sum total of its disparate and disarming parts, ever really be captured in words? Such questions anchored the debate, the dialogue Ravi Singh and I had. Ravi Singh is the publisher and the editor at Speaking Tiger. That Ravi Singh and I had when we first discussed this anthology some years ago. Long in the making, as we read and reread, spoke to friends and colleagues in the effort to put together this volume, we found stories tumbling out in English, Hindi, Urdu, and Punjabi. Soon we found ourselves hard-pressed to make a choice from an embarrassment of riches. Much like the tombs and pavilions, dargahs and caravansarais, parks and gardens, we found an abundance, and rightly so, for Delhi is a storied city in every sense of the word. New Delhi, said to be the 11th city, is built upon the ruins of many past Delhis, and each city whispers tales from hidden nooks and crannies. I'm going to skip a bit. So there is Delhi's history, which is well documented, Nadir Shah's invasions, the 1857 and the fall of Delhi, the sack of Delhi, the run-up to independence, and so on and so forth. But beyond the many blood-stained chapters in its history, to the rest of the country, Delhi is synonymous with other things too. Babus and Babalog, the infamous bureaucracy and the political dynasts, the dark days of the pandemic, the road rage that takes a daily cruel toll on the city's killer roads, the many ancient monuments that dot the city, the ever-rising crimes against women. As you might know, Delhi is also called the rape capital of India. The tree-lined avenues and the stately Sarkari mansions of Lutyens in South Delhi that make other city dwellers sigh with envy. There are the liberals and the bleeding hearts who have earned the moniker Khan Market Gang, and much else besides. We wanted to bring in as many of these motives and concerns in as many ways as we could, sometimes openly and brazenly, and sometimes tangentially woven into larger narratives of love, loss, and longing. Thank you.
I think that gives us the sense of expanse. May I ask you now, Srikar, to read what you want to tell the audience about what Rama Bhima Soma is about?
Yeah.
And also, after you read, if I may request you to tell us, maybe for those who are not directly interested in Karnataka, why is it going to be an interesting book to read?
Sure.
Yeah, I want you to look at that as well.
Yeah. Since we're talking about cities, I just want to read out a small extract that I translated from the autobiography of the Kannada novelist Kum Veerbhadrappa. So he writes about making a visit to the city of Dharwad in the 1970s. So Dharwad is a city with hallowed cultural past. There's so much that he packs into this one paragraph that I bring it up in the introduction. So he writes, repeatedly fondling the 5 rupees in my pocket that my father had given me, I realized that I had arrived near the premises of the Karnataka Vidyavartaka Sangha. Those were the heydays of people's movements in the state. Back then, I couldn't really understand what they were all about. I believed the maxim that a random stone thrown in Dharwad would land on a poet or an artist, but I had nothing resembling a stone in my hand. The mannerisms of the people ambling around there were weird. Loose pajamas, jubba, scraggly beard, cigarettes, beedies, a very peculiar and distinct kind of intellectual conversation, some book or another in everyone's hands, random exclamations and mentions of writers and activists. Because of this, the crowd looked like Gandhari's descendants in their thousands. Even when I was in their midst, I felt unconnected to them. How could I possibly get to know them? And with whose help would I do it? And so now, the end of the quote. And I write, this passage describes quite accurately my own state of mind as I was encountering this world half a century later. The renaissance that Kumvi subtly points us towards was facilitated by educational institutions such as the Vidyavardhaka Sangha and the values that they upheld. Teachers and professors were the influencers of the era, with the capacity to inspire and motivate the effervescent younger generations. What also strikes me about the excerpt is the aspiration and yearning that Kumveer Bhadrappa couches within these observations. The mannerisms of this group might have been strange, but they are appealing precisely because of it. He is in awe of the intellectual environment he witnesses and earnestly desires to be a part of it. The odd reference to Gandhari creates a mythical landscape out of the scene where roamed an entire generation seemingly spawned by a common revolutionary seed. And this also was the sort of fascination that I had when I was looking at these decades. And there are so many different branches of what we might call the left. There were the socialists and who were very distinctly connected to Ram Manohar Lohia and that particular kind of Desi socialism which distanced itself from the Naxalite and the Maoist left, and also the communists. These socialists were not radical atheists. For instance, the writer U.R. Ananthamurthy was very fond of saying, we searched for God with passion and only reluctantly came away empty-handed. And so they were very interested in folk cultures, religious traditions, without the baggage of this ultra-hyper modernity. The relationship with tradition was much more ambiguous. And so this book is a reconstruction of these very fascinating times, and it documents the transition of a society animated by a quest for equality and justice, all the way down to the seemingly sated neoliberal times that we have currently arrived at. And as much as it is social history, I've also tried to showcase biographical sketches of individuals who in some sense exemplify their times and their particular sphere. So there are, for instance, I have a chapter about the Kannada writer Shivaram Karanth, whose life across the 20th century in some sense is a microcosm of everything that is happening in Karnataka. And he was a prolific novelist. He wrote more than 40 novels, and impossible to read through everything he's written, but even a few of these novels give us such a rich glimpse of what all is happening around him, how he responded to changing political environments and new developments. And so this book is, it tries to use literature to paint a picture of social and political history. And in that sense, I think it is a new attempt, especially with respect to Karnataka. I don't think, in the English language at least, there has been an attempt to sort of review these things 50 years onwards. So enough time has passed that I could reflect critically on all of these writers, while at the same time, it's not so far that it is completely distant from what we are going through right now. So it's a nice sort of sweet spot to look back and understand how we got from these socialist, egalitarian-centered societies all the way down to what we are experiencing right now. So it's that transition that this book captures, and that's something you are interested to, inquire into. You'll probably find this book interesting.
Very useful to look particularly at Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, or before bifurcation, the state of Andhra Pradesh as well. I think I saw a lot of parallels, but I don't think we had, we don't have a beautiful collection of sources and like you had available to you, particularly because of people like Karant and Anantamurthy. I think they were also visionaries in terms of rewriting social history. We do have some examples, and I don't want to take the discussion away into Telangana and Andhra, but we haven't documented enough, I think, and that is where we need to do it. But I also feel that probably some of the things that triggered my own imagination, particularly when I was looking at your work, Srikar, was that there are many young minds, and today you talk about education, institutions, you talked about the way, and I was happy to see the way you said, your own institution influenced what you read and how you read and what you became. And that's really, nice to hear, because sometimes those of us, who are on the teacher side of the fence get disheartened to see where are we really going, are people reading? And then I think when it comes to Delhi, the problem that people talk about today, especially in the popular imagination, cultural imagination, is chaos, right? Some of that chaos is reflected in the stories that you have picked as well. But if I can say this, some of the stories also felt very, it could be any city. It could be Hyderabad. It could be, Mumbai in some sense. But it came back because I think some of the senior authors in your collection are conscious of the place. But some of the younger writers are, it's more emotional and their personal connect with the city. It's about themselves. So there is more self-reflection and there's more angst about what they see around them. Am I right or am I off there?
No, well, I agree that in some instances, this could be Mumbai that one is talking about when one is talking about the skyscrapers that come up. Who makes them? Just machines don't, human beings do. So it could be any city, why just Delhi, right? So Bhisham Sani's story that is about the unskilled or the semi-skilled labor that comes, the bricklayers, the people who make cement, who make these buildings. That's not really specific to Delhi, but it is also a building block to the Delhi that we see. Delhi is not just the babus and the bureaucrats. Delhi is also the service, why Delhi? Any big city are also the service providers, you see, and they come from all over the country. And they bring with them their own lingo. So the postal workers or the people who come to fix your cables, the migrant labor, and each has parking attendants, They, oddly enough, a great many parking attendants are either from Bihar or from Uttar Pradesh. So you can tell from their boli, their dialect, and they will speak to you in Hindustani, but there'll be an inflection. And you can understand that this is not just North India, but the eastern part of it. So there are these small specificities you know. I'm sure Hyderabad must be having its own, where you can tell that, people have come from this part of the city. So the problem with an anthology is, you can call it a problem, you can call it a challenge, you can call it, I don't know how you read it, but one wants to bring in multiple voices, The second part of your remark really was about the younger and the older. There, I wouldn't entirely agree, because I don't think it's an either or. I think people are going by personal experiences. There's a story here about students who come to Delhi University. Now, I studied in Delhi University, and I can tell you it's a huge melting pot. The great unwashed India comes. Till our schools, we are in a comfortable little, cocoons. And then we come to Delhi University, where we meet people from different parts of the world, of different socio-economic backgrounds, which isn't entirely possible at the school level, right? So I think that Delhi University experience, when it comes in an anthology like this, brings another dimension to a seasoned older writer, to a Bhisham Sani, or to a Khushwant Singh, or to a Manzoor Ehtisham's understanding of Delhi. Then there's a story here about Delhi's gay subculture, for example. I'm sure Hyderabad also has its gay subculture. Sometimes there are geographical markers that tell you that, okay, this is entirely located. So the gay subculture would, I suppose, be much the same in, let's say, a Mumbai or a Delhi or a Hyderabad, whatever. It's the markers of localities, of specificities, that tell you that this is about Delhi. So some writers have those very specific. Keki Daruwala has a lovely story about a man going on a long walk, and all the places that he encounters. Now, I see that as almost a directory or as a map.
But that's Keki,
That's
he's so
Keki.
good with his maps and directions.
But
and
the
telling
point
you where
I'm
you are.
making here is that we live in an era of name changing. Everything is being changed. Cities, parks. I've lived in Delhi since I was 4 years old. So 58 years I've lived in Delhi. And I've seen Delhi change. Keki's had a longer inning there. He's telling me about names that had already changed by the time I remember Delhi, right? And now, this is another Delhi with different names. So all of those names and places have also gone. In the name of urban renewal, we've not just given new names, Mughal Gardens has become something else and so on, but we've, in many cases, pulled down things. We think, Arey, iski kya zarurat hai? It's just taking up so much prime real estate. And in the flagrant violation of laws, things are pulled down, something else comes up in its place. And this, unfortunately, happens also with Delhi's built heritage. There are the lesser known monuments of Delhi. I've written a whole book called Invisible City, which is about the lesser known monuments. And while writing that, I noticed that things just disappear. Things literally under your nose. Things ostensibly protected by ASI. So, I mean, I'm sort of drifting from the topic, but in some stories here, we find glimpses of that. So there's a validation also of Delhi's past.
Sure. Thank you. I think it's time for me to open for some questions, and then we can have some closing remarks. The lights are very bright, so you please raise your hands. Yeah.
My name's Sanjay. The specific question that I intervene on is the time slice. I mean, are you a Delhiite? You stayed in Delhi throughout? What is your experience?
Since I was 4 years old.
Pardon? 74 years. So no, I just wanted to check because, see, he started off in Hyderabad, went to Bangalore. He's got... Correct. But I'm talking about a similar concept. Yeah. I stayed in Delhi. I did part of my schooling and growing up in Delhi, came back to Hyderabad, went back again to Delhi for my graduation, then again I'm back in the rest of the world. So the story is that when I am there at different time slices, I experience Delhi differently. And I have lived through that particular experience, and I wanted to check whether that sort of an experience also has been caught in your book, because he has caught it. I could make that out.
Take a couple of questions and then.
I didn't get the question though.
My question is to Srikar sir. Thank you for the wonderful book. I've started. Uh, am I audible now?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for the wonderful book. I've started reading it. I think it's a significant book and going to become a seminal one
Thank you.
in the years to come. Uh, I was curious to know that how you went about the region of North Karnataka, especially the parts of it which are included under Hyderabad Karnataka region, now known as Kalyan Karnataka region, because my question also resonates with what Professor Aparna before made a remark. So was it more difficult for you to navigate around the sources, since the history and the culture of North Karnataka is not as well documented or as much comes to popular attention?
Absolutely. Great question. In fact, you've arrived at. Okay, okay.
I thought I saw one more hand at the back. Yeah, we'll take one more and then come back.
Sure.
Yes, Swayambhu, yes. No, it's coming, but yeah, you can start.
Hey, so this question is for both of you. So, given that you talked about how cities and places have changed, and how there's also in the topic on Karnataka, I talked about how there's a tussle between modernity and tradition that you discussed. How do you see writing about spaces as a kind of preserving of memory or an archive when the place changes so rapidly from generation to generation or even year to year? How do you see both the writing as a marker of memory or a holder of memory and its place in a movement from tradition to modernity?
Yeah, the last one and then we have this. Just there in the middle.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. So my question is on sources. So when you're writing a history of a place, you can either look at the social sciences side of it, where professional historians have written, or as ma'am, you have written through through authors and novelists. So when you are sort of dealing more towards towards authors and literary sources, then you have that creative freedom in a sense. But when you are taking social sciences route, it's based on hard facts and so on. So my question is, like, how do you balance when presenting your version of the city? How do you balance between these two sort of disparate sources?
Yeah.
Thank you.
The last question, let me address that. A book like this aims to, hopes to, supplement and complement the work of the professional historian. The professional historian is doing his job, but the creative writer, in a way, adds another layer of understanding to it. Manzoor Ehtesham's novel or Krishna Sopti's novel, it documents a point in Delhi's history which has been chronicled by the professional historian. It simply gives a kind of a lived version of that. So I think increasingly people are not looking at disciplines in silos. At least in the humanities and the social sciences, people are rising above the picket fences of a discipline and saying that, you know, what's to stop a student of literature from looking at history and political science and so on, and vice versa. So my understanding is that that silo-like mentality now is going away also from the social sciences.
To begin with the North Karnataka question. So one of the sort of self-professed lack of this book is that North Karnataka is not as prominent as Mysore, Bangalore, South Canada, because these are places I've lived in. Even Dharwad, I haven't actually lived in these places. And the Hyderabad, Karnataka region, so it comes up in strange ways, like the history of the Vachanakaras, the Lingayat movement, for instance, that is basically started in this region called Kalyana Karnataka. So this book starts, the first chapter begins with the story of Basavana and everything that happened in 12th century, because it has exercised such enormous influence over Kannada culture, the Vachanas themselves, and over poetry, over religious history, so much so that the historian M.M. Kalburgi from Gulbarga, so he believed that if there is such a thing as Karnataka Dharma, it can be traced back to this particular moment in history and this movement itself because of its also progressive anti-caste ideas. So the specter of North Karnataka looms over the book, but the farthest I actually physically travel is Bellary district to meet Kumvir Bhadrappa. I did go to Raichur once, but I haven't traveled extensively around these places as much as I would like to. So the almost as a sort of compensation for this, like a year after this book came out, I wrote a long form piece about Kalburgi and history of this region and what all we know and what all we don't know. So you're right in pointing out that it's a space that that is not as rich in documentation as other parts, and that is definitely felt in the book. And I've tried to work my way around that because I'm not from that region, because it is, even within Karnataka, there's just so many different, spaces. So it is something that looms in the foreground rather than, background rather than the foreground of the book. Maybe someone else who is more well versed in that region and that particular, rooted there, they can probably, write more convincingly and more knowingly about that. So yeah, the book is a sort of patchwork quilt of various things. So North Karnataka comes up here and there, but not as much as it should have, I think, yeah.
This question about archiving.
Archiving, yeah. So space is changing. So you can see it in, like, for instance, take the Western Ghats. In the early 20th century, you have the great Kannada writer Kuvempu, who writes these big fat novels set in the Western Ghats, the Malnad region. And if you read them now, you can almost see that as a marker of a region before it has been ecologically devastated, and that region has completely changed. The Western Ghats in Kuvempu's novels do not really exist anymore. Even Dharwad once used to be this really vibrant cultural center. Everyone from so in the early 20th century, a lot of the movement for Karnataka unification and statehood that came from Dharwad and all the way to Girish Karnad, who studied at Karnataka University, it remained bastion. But now that sheen has worn off. And even Mysore University used to boast of huge names, and so that sheen has also sort of worn off. So you see these once vibrant centers effaced by modernity also in some sense. So it is sobering to read these, and you realize everything goes through periods of change, but you can't really do much about it, I suppose, other than reflect on it and see where we're going from here. Same goes for a city like Bangalore. It's such a dynamic city. Everyone who's lived in Bangalore in the 20th century remembers that it's this tree-filled paradise, but it's not quite the same anymore. So modernity has had varying effects on everything about the state, I think. And regarding the boundaries between, like she said, I think more and more writers are looking to break these boundaries with literature and sociology and history, because literature tells us as much about history as history tells us about literature. And so the balance is to always get the best of both worlds. So I'm writing about a particular region, say Shivaram Karanth. His novels give us a glimpse of South Canara, but at the same time, I'm also talking about South Canara history, and so it's trying to use both to complement each other in some ways, I think.
May I add to the question about the archive? So a book like this preserves what is only in the memory of a certain generation. For example, one of the stories is about Patpatiyas. Just after partition, there was this influx of population, and on the body of a bullet mobike, there was a 6-seater rickshaw that was mounted. It made a pat sound, so locally it was called a patpatiya, right? Now they're all gone because of pollution and other reasons. More often than not, they were driven by Sikhs who'd come with the crossover of population. And they were such a fixture and such a part of the city because they allowed, shared travel, public transport. So there is a story about those drivers. Now, people of your age, for example, living in Delhi would not have seen it or even heard about it, but their parents or their grandparents might have. That's the other thing an anthology like this does. Archives are of all kinds of things, of memories, of places, of things that make a city or things that are part of a city. For my generation, Patpatiyas were pretty much something that we took, we clambered onto, and sometimes they would let more than 6 people, so we were kind of hanging on by the railings. All this was part of growing up in Delhi, now gone. So, archives are from multiple sources, and that's where fiction steps in. It gives you a glimpse of those varied sources.
Paromita Vora was saying there that she does not like to differentiate between fiction and non-fiction. And I thought we moved so seamlessly into this one. So I'm going to thank her later for that thought. But are you saying we are out of time? Yeah, I thought that was what you were saying. But yes, it has been a great, learning for me. Definitely, I'm far more, enlightened about various aspects of Karnataka that I only got a sense of by watching a play or listening to Mamta Sagar tell me the background of the poem she's writing, or, things like that. But of course, Delhi, we all think we know about Delhi, but we are all outsiders. I'm a total outsider to Delhi. I only go there for work of a temporary, transitory nature, like an examiner or conference. So in the academic world, we also say that we are not part of the Delhi social scientific lineage, and that gives us, a space and a distance, and you know what I'm talking about in that sense. But we are all fascinated. And I think that kind of grew, and looking at those stories, yeah, I got a sense of why you chose them. But yes, it was
Thank you very
wonderful
much.
to read.
Thank you.
Thank you both.